6:15 p.m. with myself, Brian Travis, and Nicole Shimoni. Are there any announcements? Seeing none, any comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding any items not on the agenda? Seeing none, let's move to item 4, the director's report on the monthly financials. Ms. Barb Leonti.
Hey, good evening. If we could start with page 2 of the cash position report. For the for the month ended September 30th, we started the month with $25,236,731 in cash. We booked $7,023,418 in receipts. We spent $7,142,914. This leaves us with an ending cash balance of $25,117,235 across all funds.
Sorry, don't want to interrupt, but can
Is
we get
the
this on the
report-
screen?
Yeah, it should be there. It's the budget to actual report. If you go to page 2, please. That's what I just went over right now. Moving over to the budget to actual cash basis, the summary of results. I'll start with the general fund, which is on pages 3 and 4. For the month of September, we booked $2,163,290 in revenue. This is offset by $2,354,314 in expense. This leaves us with a net loss for the month of $191,024. And year to date, we booked $19,165,515 in revenue. This is offset by $17,585,789 in expense. And this leaves us with a year to date net income of $1,579,726. I'm looking at the results in the general fund, starting with the revenues. EIT continues to remain strong, as well as interest income. Year to date, we have $203,000 booked in interest earnings, which is $123,000 better than what we budgeted. We received our state aid in the month of September, which is used to pay down the MMO for the pension plans. We received $73,000 better than what we budgeted. And also in the month of September, we received our final payment on the Everhart Park project. We've received $175,000 to close that out. Looking at revenues in the other departments, under building and housing, rental permits are still lagging. There's still quite a bit of deposits that still need to be booked. And also under the housing department, the ordinances violations sent to district court. At this point in time, I'm projecting that this line item will not meet budget by $13,000. Looking at the Public Works Department, street openings, again, looking at projections through the end of the year, this line item will also not meet budget by $40,000. Moving over to the expense side for the general fund, we did receive our state aid. We received $1,044,398 from the Auditor General's office. Of that amount, we deposited $330,192 into the non-union pension fund and $714,206 into the police pension fund. As of September 30th, our MMO has been satisfied. We also received $134,773 from the Auditor General's office, which needs to be used for municipalities that have volunteer fire companies within their municipal limits. We passed this money on to Good Fellowship and the Westchester Volunteer Relief Funds. And this money is required to be distributed to those recipients within 60 days, and that criteria has been met. Looking at other expenses that are over budget at this point in time, overtime within the Public Works Department is overspent by $13,000. A portion of these costs are offset by the special event revenue, which is booked under the Recreation Department. Capital expense is over budget, but these expenses are offset by ARP and grants received. And the transfer to the non-union pension fund is over budget by $100,000. We deposited the state aid that I just talked about as as well as an additional $100,000 from the .25 pension monies. Moving over to our special revenue funds, our stream protection, fire, and liquid fuels. The fire fund, no additional revenues will be booked for the year. All the contractual revenues have been met. Liquid fuels, the paving project, to the best of my knowledge, is completed. I just received the invoice that we will be paying within the month of October. And stream protection, continued capital projects and stormwater are still in process. Moving over to the enterprise funds, starting with sewer on page 8. For the month of September, we booked $551,316 in revenue. This is offset by $434,498 in expense. This leaves us with a net income for the month of $116,918. And year-to-date, we booked $5,398,672 in revenue. This is offset by $3,837,642 in expense, which leaves us with a net income of $1,561,030. Looking at the revenues in the sewer fund, they are all meeting expectations at this point. On the expense side, overtime is overspent by $5,000. Building repairs are overspent by $5,000, and professional fees are overspent by $28,000. Moving on to page 9, the parking fund. For the month of September, we booked $566,550 in revenue. This is offset by $338,845 in expense. This leaves us with a net income for the month of $227,705. And year-to-date, we booked $4,141,042 in revenue. This is offset by $3,243,827 in expense, and this leaves us with a net income of $897,215 for the year. Looking at the parking fund, we are seeing lot revenue is trailing behind budget, so I need to do some review on deposits that have been booked, as well as talking with the parking director. And then on the expense side, for the parking fund, the overtime line item is overspent by $21,000. So looking from this point in time to the end of the year, if I had my magical crystal ball, I am projecting four line items within the general fund, and then another line item that is another talking point on the agenda for tonight. So I am projecting that deed transfer will not meet budget by $58,000, the ordinance violations in the housing department by $13,000, street openings by $40,000, and liened real estate taxes by $13,000. If I add them all up, that comes to $124,000. I can offset that by projections in interest income through December 31st of $66,000. So this leaves us with about a $58,000 revenue shortfall, projecting basically with all the knowledge that I have in front of me at this point in time. And then we also have our PHMIC refund line item. We had $275,000 budgeted in 2024, but we are expected only to receive $125,000. So the ask this evening is for a transfer from the capital operating reserve fund to meet that budget line item. So how are we going to pay for some of these shortfalls? My personal goal for year end is to have $2.5 million in general fund revenues. I think that's a good number to meet the first 3 months of next year and not have, as I've said before, not meet, having to take any sort of loan or borrow from any other funds. Year to date, as of 9/30, we have about $2.7 million in the general fund Pliget reserve. So if all of this came to fruition, we would have the cash on hand to be able to meet these budget shortfalls. So our goal for the next 3 months of the year, managing expenses and managing cash flow. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Any comments from the dais? Questions, concerns? Any public comments? Seeing none. Thank you, Barb.
Yep.
Old business you just mentioned here. Item A, motion to transfer funds from capital operating reserve fund to general fund for healthcare refund in the amount of $149,509. And are there any objections, or Sean, do you want to address that first?
I just want to remind council, this time last year when we were finalizing the budget, one of the things I pointed out was the high variability of this healthcare refund that happens because we insure through a cooperative and we are self-insured. So our performance, if we perform well, and by good performance means we don't have a lot of claims, the borough's refunded the lion's share of the difference between the claims it has paid through its premiums and the claims it's paid into the claim fund. The premiums it's paid into the claim fund. It's late, sorry. The premiums it's paid into the claims fund and the claims funds that are paid out for claims. So this has been a hard thing to think about because we had 2.5 years of unusual claims experience because people weren't going to hospitals and doctors' offices. They were avoiding them. So in those years, we experienced a very high refund number. You can see in the attachment, we had surpluses of 646, 621, and 496 in consecutive years. And then rolling into 2023, things got kind of back to normal where we were at $125,000. But in prior years, when I say prior years, I mean years before the pandemic kind of upset things, we were averaging between $235,000 and $250,000 per year in refund, and we had one low year of $58,000. So when we were sitting here last year, the other component you need to be aware of is we don't know right now what our refund's going to be for our experience in 2024 for two reasons. 2024 isn't finished yet, and there's a reconciliation process that happens with PIMIC where reinsurance claims have to take longer to process. So when an individual claim in the year claims for an individual exceeds $75,000, we have a stop loss insurance that stops that. It doesn't hurt us anymore if someone needs more than $75,000 of care. Also, we have a stop loss aggregate insurance that insures the entire group. If the entire group goes over its claim fund limit, PIMIC doesn't come back to us and ask for more money. And our claims fund paid, you don't see it on this chart I have here, but the claims fund paid in 2023 were very large. They were around $2.9 million because we had some extraordinary experience in 2023. I say all that to say we don't know what the refund's going to be until well into the following year. So we're just really trying to guess. And sometimes we can be really off. And I don't want to, budgeting should never be that far off. It's like playing darts. You want to be near the center of the board when you budget. So what we proposed was budgeting the 5-year trailing average of refunds, excluding the COVID experience, and the number there was 275, with the understanding that when we got to this point in the following year, we would either transfer money. If we did better than that, we would transfer money from the general to the capital operating reserve. If we did worse than that, we would have council entertain a motion, which is starting here, to transfer dollars from the capital operating reserve to the general fund to bridge the gap. So that's why we're here. And it's a budgeting method I'm going to propose again this year in this year's budget. And I'm actually going to recommend we reduce that number of 275 down a little bit because it looks like from what we know so far of our experience this year, we're going to be at another number around 125 to 175 for next year.
Makes sense to me.
No, thank you for that explanation. Yes. I have no issues with that. Any further questions? Any public comment? Seeing that we don't have any objections, we could put that on the consent agenda. Item B, approve the September 2024 meeting minutes. Are there any comments here? Dais, any public comments? Any objections about approving them? Seeing none, Item B has been approved. New business. I'm going to read these off and mention what they are, and then we can discuss them. And item 4, motion to approve purchasing requests here. USALCO, $12,540. That's for phosphorus removal. T2 Systems, $62,420. That's a mobile license plate reader. T8 emergency vehicle service for $23,980.76. That's a upfitting of a vehicle. T8 emergency vehicle service for $19,731.21. Again, upfitting of a vehicle. All event party rentals, $13,375.60. That's for equipment for the restaurant festival. That includes tents and chairs. And finally, Dynamix Agitators Inc. for $13,687, and that's replacing a gear for a mixer. Are there any comments on the dais about any of those motions to approve items A through F? Are there any public comments? Are there any objections? Seeing none, we can put this on the consent agenda, approving items A through F. Other business? Chief McClure, Assistant Chief McClure, thank you.
I'll be brief. The fire department is asking to move forward for discussion at work session next Tuesday on approving the signing of a contract for replacement fire engine that is defined in the fire protection contracts for this contract cycle in the amount of $1,388,417. That money is collected amongst the 6 municipalities that participate in the contracts, and additionally, the borough is seeking a grant this fall to help offset some of those capital costs. Sean?
I believe it's like 684,000, just to confirm. I think that would be correct. I think the number was 684.
We will be asking for the maximum amount through LSA, which is $1 million.
Okay, thank you. And then with that, is there any comments regarding about what Chief McClure said about the purchase of the vehicle? Any public comments? Any objections? Seeing none, we could put that on consent for next week. And any other business? Seeing none, we could adjourn at 8:38.